Welcome back to Sunday Vibes, one and all. The UK is still in lockdown, so we're not yet back in the pub. It's freezing outside. There was like minus 20 degrees up in Scotland, so that is pretty cold. But we are here to warm your spirits today. Christopher Hamill and Patrick Van Straten joining me. Hamster, bit down in the dumps, mate, because you didn't get a good night's sleep. You okay?
I rarely get a good night's sleep. Borderline insomniac, so I'm all good. This is familiar territory for me. But you know what? Watched Leicester versus Brighton last night. Last minute winner for Leicester. You know, I would have won that either way. And, you know, Celtic rolled over the mighty St Mirren, mate. So the 10 is back on. Come on, positive vibes only.
I mean, you do need Gerrard to effectively throw the towel in at this stage. But nevertheless, keep believing.
What we need is a scandal, mate. Fingers crossed.
An urgent scandal. And Pato, you told us before we started shooting, you've just done exercise. You're a very hot boy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm having a hot boy winter.
I don't know why I said it like that.
Jesus. I mean, also, it was badly timed as well with Chris Hamill slurping his water down, like in a very lascivious way. But yeah, I'm extremely warm. I'm less hot given that we had one false start before this. So my face has stopped being like beetroot red and it's now just like light salmon pink. But we'll see if I go a human colour during the course of this video.
Right, let's see if we can get to it. Let's crack on with the first question then. It was sent in by Mr. Ishan, who says, do you think that the Thiago disrespect this season has been warranted, or do you think it's just because he's a Liverpool player? Now, this is obviously in relation to, I'd say, football Twitter mainly, battering Thiago in recent weeks with the terms, oh, he's too slow for this Liverpool team, he takes away from their best elements. And it kind of got us thinking, didn't it? Who is the most disrespected player this season? Is it Thiago? And do football Twitter have something? Have they kind of hit on something, or are they just miles off? What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Because, like you said, it's mostly come from opposition fans, and it's mostly just little oiks on Twitter that are desperate for a reaction. I mean, anyone that knows football knows that Thiago is a formidable player and one of the best, most well-rounded central midfielders in world football still, despite, you know, a few injury woes in recent campaigns. I suppose this comes off the back of him being in the team when they lost 3 straight home games, right? To Burnley, Brighton and City. Dumped out of the FA Cup against Manchester United as well. And they're now 4th in the division after being, title favourites during that period he was off, that he was injured. Now they're 3 points behind Leicester and only 1 ahead of Chelsea and West Ham. So things have come crashing down for Jurgen Klopp a lot, haven't they? In recent times, it sort of coincided, I suppose, with his reintroduction into the side. But, you know, that's just people putting 1 and 1 together, which is stupid, isn't it? Like, his numbers are still very decent. I think he's completing, 4 tackles and interceptions from the base of midfield, still around 70, 80 passes a game with a 90% pass accuracy, 6 long balls, and that intimates that he is operating from deep. He's not influencing the game further forward. And yes, he doesn't have any goals or assists, but that's not his role in this side, is it? I mean, he's having to pick up the slack for Fabinho and Henderson as well, having to play centre-half. And that midfield 3 for Liverpool has just been constantly rotated. And I'm not saying it's a complete get-out clause for him, because, you know what, he could have been maybe marginally better in some games, but they've not really figured out the chemistry in that midfield 3. Like, who else has played in there? Wijnaldum, I suppose, pretty consistently. Shaqiri, Jones.
Oxlade-Chamberlain.
Oxlade-Chamberlain, like, it's just not the makeup of a great midfield, is it? So to put that all on his shoulders, little bit stupid. And I think most of it is tongue-in-cheek. United fans, Chelsea fans, enjoying the fact that the guy that Liverpool brought in to make them a more dynamic side is experiencing a bit of a rough patch. But I'll die on this hill. Like, he is the most well-rounded midfielder probably in the Premier League, and I'm sure, when certain people come back from injury, we'll see the best of him.
It's interesting you say that it's tongue-in-cheek.
Go on, Pat, you go.
It's interesting that you say it's tongue-in-cheek, because, like, I think it might have started that way. Like, I think it might have started like, oh, let's rib Liverpool fans. But now I think that, like, this narrative has truly taken hold. And I think part of it is that we see these with or without you stats. So, people say, oh, look at the terrible results they've had with Thiago in the side. Therefore, it must be because of Thiago. But I mean, like,
yeah,
It's not Thiago. Like the Man City defeat is obviously nothing to do with Thiago. I was watching that game and all I kept thinking of was that video of the problem here is they've got Woody from Toy Story in goal. Like I just kept laughing the whole way through. Like every time Alisson made a mistake.
One of the great.
It's so good. And but like it's just one of those things where it's like, oh, okay, we can see a correlation and we assume that therefore Thiago is the cause. And I don't know, like. I agree that the midfield has just been kind of imbalanced and stuff. And some of the things that Thiago's been criticised for seem to me like to be bigger issues in the rest of the squad. So if Thiago is taking too many touches and not finding a forward pass, which actually every time I watch him, he is passing forward. But if that is a criticism, maybe it's because he hasn't got the options to pass forward that he would normally have. So it just seems like the balance is off in the side. Oh, what's changed? Thiago's changed. That must be the problem.
What do you think about, gents, about the way that, English fans continue to lionise like really combative midfielders, let's say Højbjerg and Kante, and when the going gets tough, ball-playing central midfielders who may be a little bit more slight, maybe aren't as aggressive in the tackle. I'm thinking maybe Jorginho here as well, although Thiago's defensive numbers have been consistently good throughout his career. What do you think about that whole dynamic? Because it feels like Premier League audiences, or at least, football Twitter, enjoy criticising this sort of player more so than others.
Oh, definitely. Well, football Twitter, firstly, it is a really, sort of volatile place, isn't it? And effectively, everybody's just trying to one-up each other. Yeah. I totally agree. If Højbjerg had cost more money, say if Højbjerg had been a £50 million signing, I'm sure he would have been picked apart. And I know Thiago wasn't £50 million, but because of the pedigree he arrives with, people enjoy any sort of failure that he produces. And I really don't think he, like Pat has said, has been the source of Liverpool's failure. Him taking too many touches on the ball is way down the list behind the sort of mass injury problems they've had, strikers not being able to finish their chances, central midfielders having to play centre-backs. Thiago being too slow off the ball is probably ranking about 50th in Liverpool's problems right now. So quite how he has become the brunt of some football opinions as to why Liverpool aren't performing boggles the mind, quite frankly. I saw Jay, who works Football Daily, runs the Football List, an amazing Instagram account. He was kind of saying, he's too slow on the ball for this team. I was thinking, absolutely ridiculous. Thiago might have the quickest brain of any footballer in the league. Sure, he's not fast off the ball. If you want him to chase back and try and put in a last-ditch tackle, he's not your man. But I cannot believe he's taking flack for Liverpool's poor results when clearly there are 25 major issues at the club that need to be addressed before that. He'll be absolutely fine when Hendo and Fabinho get back in the midfield. Van Dijk comes in behind him again. He'll be back to being the best midfielder in the league alongside Kevin De Bruyne and Bruno Fernandes. Just relax. The disrespect, I think, towards Thiago has been massive online, and I'm not having it anymore. I agree with you. Is there any other players that we think have been a bit disrespected this season?
I very rarely think of Kevin De Bruyne as a central midfielder now. But he is, isn't he? So when I said most well-rounded, him versus Kevin De Bruyne, I mean, Kevin De Bruyne, I definitely prefer him in my side, but that's neither here nor there. I mean, we picked Ilkay Gundogan for our underrated team of the season, didn't we? And I feel like he was a player at the start of the season that was given an awful lot of disrespect as well. And obviously there's a common theme here that central midfielders are coming in for an unwarranted amount of flack from people online. I mean, it is, one of the most difficult positions to play. And these guys are playing in sort of very complex systems and sometimes sacrificing elements of their own game in order to, facilitate others. So I think Ilkay Gundogan's a good suggestion for this, and I'm really glad that he's hit such good form. What do you reckon to that, Shout?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, when you say he's hit good form, he's hit good goal-scoring form, right? And it's kind of what you were saying before, which is that, people respect players who do things that they can see very clearly. So, when they see a player snapping into tackles, they're like, yes, I can see what this guy does. When a midfielder is scoring goals, like Ilkay Gundogan is, they can say, oh, I see what he does. And I think that generally speaking in the Premier League, there's always been a disrespect for technical players. When I think of technical players, the only one who I ever think was truly, truly loved was David Silva. And
Dennis Bergkamp, maybe.
But even Dennis Bergkamp though was like quite a big guy and pretty physical and also like quite aggressive. And he was unusual at the time as well. You know, like he was playing in a front two. Whereas if you're going to play in the middle of the park, I think it's always been assumed no, you have to do really like you have to be a crunching tackler. And even, you know, with someone like Cesc Fabregas, who everyone agreed was great, there also became the very popular narrative of, oh, okay, you can see when Arsenal stopped being a winning side. It was when they no longer had Patrick Vieira, and it was when they had Cesc Fabregas, you know? So there's always been a kind of privileging there of athletic ability. And I think sometimes that's related to a sort of xenophobia. I think the British love to think of themselves as like bigger and stronger and tougher than like Spaniards and things. So I think that there's some of that goes on. But yeah, generally I think somebody like Santi Cazorla like never really got the respect he was due as a central midfielder, I think. And if I thought
Juan Mata, when he put up do you remember that season he put up like 40 goal involvements across all competitions for Chelsea? I never hear Juan Mata getting spoken about as the best ever creator in the Premier League.
Wasn't he like the best player in the league that year? Like he was he was their player. He was their player of the He was their player of the season 2 years running. And when he went to Man United, I was like, if they just park him at 10 with a competent midfield behind him, he's going to be unreal. And they never really did that. But it was like, yeah, I don't know. I just think that there is like a fundamental disrespect for a guy who achieves through technical ability. And guys like Højbjerg have the advantage of playing in systems that cover for their defects, whereas at the moment the idea is, oh god, Liverpool have loads of problems because their entire defence is out, and Thiago is trying to cover for all of those, and the fact that he isn't quite able to do it at 30 years old has become just a stick to beat him with, when really it's a bit of an impossible job. But I imagine that the narrative will come round on him a little bit, in the same way that maybe it'll start to come round on Rodri when Man City win the league by 25 points.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. I totally agree with your idea about the technical players being disrespected, like I said, Juan Mata and that. I'm just trying to think off the top of my head a few names that I would suggest, and I'm going to throw a couple at you from a Manchester United point of view, and I know I'm about to get abuse in the comments for that one. But I think Scott McTominay and Fred have been disrespected this season. Seen consistently as whipping boys. Mate, they get battered online. They get battered.
Fred gets battered. Scott McTominay gets maybe over-criticised at times, but he also gets massively overpraised a lot of the time, so it evens out. Whereas Fred, I never see anyone say a nice word about Fred, and I think he's a perfectly decent midfielder.
Never see anything nice said about Fred. And he's doing a very good job this season.
I feel like a lot of that happens within your fan base. Like, I don't see many neutrals that are that concerned about Fred, whereas the whole McTominay-Fred thing seems to happen on Manchester United Twitter. And I know that you're forever tweeting that Scott McTominay is improving, and I think that is quite an important narrative to hone in on, because like why it was similar to when Darren Fletcher, broke through, almost as if these things are cyclical. Like, people aren't given the time to improve. Like, youngsters aren't given the time to improve. And we saw that last season a little bit with Tammy Abraham, didn't we? Like, Chelsea fans clamouring for youth to break through. Lampard brings them through, and then all of a sudden, when they're not the finished article, when they go through a bad spell, they're kind of thrown under the bus. So that one's a little bit more interesting than Fred. I think Fred was perhaps just brought in for a big fee. People misunderstood what he was, and now they sort of know his limitations. Probably give him a little bit more bandwidth.
Yeah.
That would be my take on matters.
What about Mason Mount? I see him get quite a lot of stick for about the last 6 weeks before Tuchel came into the job. All I saw about Mason Mount was he's only in the team because of Frank Lampard. Well, I think Tuchel's taken over, and Mason Mount is still one of Chelsea's best players. Do you think Mason Mount is maybe disrespected in the league, Pat?
Yeah, probably. I mean, Mason Mount's one of those guys who, like, we will occasionally get criticised for kind of flip-flopping about, but we're not really flip-flopping on him. Our idea was he was never as good as people said he was when people said he was like one of the best players in the league, and he's certainly not a bad player. So whatever the narrative is, it looks like we're being kind of contrarian. But the thing is about Mason Mount, like, he's had very consistent output at a pretty young age, and more importantly, when Mason Mount doesn't have a great creative game, and he's still quite an unorthodox attacking midfielder, he produces a lot defensively. Like Mason Mount is always going to give you something. He's always going to be a dynamic runner. He's always going to make runs beyond the striker. He's always going to track back and defend. And I can absolutely see why, as a manager, you think, especially when you're a manager who is in a hole like Frank Lampard was, this is a guy who's going to go out there and give me absolutely everything he can. And yeah, I think Mason Mount offers something different to a lot of other attacking midfielders in the league. He, in a way, he's quite reminiscent of. He's not as elegant, but there's a part of him that's a little bit like Oscar when Mourinho first came back and he said, you know what, I'm going to build around Oscar instead of Mata because Oscar will defend more and I can trust him to do that. And I think that's probably the attitude with Mason Mount as well. It's like, you know what you'll get. Mason Mount is never going to drop really a 4 out of 10 performance. He's always really going to give you a 6. And I think when you're a manager, that's incredibly valuable. Whereas, you know, Kai Havertz might turn up and be the best young player on the planet on a particular day, but he also might be a total passenger.
Yeah.
And I mean, you've just highlighted there, the fact that we flip-flop on him, I think is perfectly reasonable. But there seems to be none of that discourse online. Like, you've either got to love a player or hate a player. And the analysis about the guys that we've mentioned and some guys we're going to talk about seems to be like a mile wide online, doesn't it? But like an inch deep. I mean, if it's taken Ilkay Gundogan 6 seasons for people to appreciate what a phenomenal footballer they are, then they're clearly not watching football matches. And they're clearly not just like number crunchers either, because Gundogan's numbers have always been decent in one element or another, right? Yeah. I mean, what is Gundogan at now this season? I think
9 goals.
I think it's 8 goal involvements in his last 8 games for Man City at the time.
Crazy, absolutely crazy.
And this is really the first time that kind of people have spoke about him being underrated, right? I think his best season before that was like 7 goal involvements in 18-19, and he's been like consistently a large part of a great Manchester City side. So I think that probably speaks for itself. What about some guys further up the field? Like Patrick Bamford, is he getting the credit he's due this season?
I'll jump on Bamford just because I feel like I've personally disrespected Patrick Bamford in the past. I feel like I'm almost convinced on like a We Need to Talk at some stage I said something like Leeds need to upgrade the striker because Bamford's not going to be good enough for them, along that sort of narrative, which I think it's obviously proved to be incorrect. But I think at the time a lot of people held a very similar sort of feeling towards Patrick Bamford, is that he might not be able to make the step up. He's proved plenty of people wrong. Do I think he's being disrespected at the moment, though? I don't think he's actually being disrespected. I think he's probably held in about the right regard as having a fantastic season. I think, like, to say he's disrespected, is anybody expecting more than this? Do you know what I mean? Like, people are saying he should go to the Euros with England. Do you actually think he's going to go to the Euros with England? I would be personally very surprised.
Yeah, there's a fine line between underrated and disrespected, isn't there? I think if anything, like, people are pleasantly surprised with Patrick Bamford.
I agree, totally.
And are probably willing to give him the credit, but yeah, I think that a position in England's team would perhaps be getting carried away at this point.
I just think football opinion is really hard to shift. I think that if you've always been seen as a great player, then you can actually have several really bad seasons before anybody notices you're bad, and then for the rest of your career people will talk about how amazing you were, even if you were never really that great. And similarly, like, if you have a reputation for underperforming, or if you've had like a bad season in the Premier League, then people will never get over it, and it will take years and years of you performing at a really high level for anyone to forget it, as we've seen with, as we'd see with Memphis Depay if he came back to the Prem, or Florian Thauvin, and as we're seeing with Bamford now. So I think, it's really hard for people to change their opinions in football, because fundamentally, like, they believe that whatever they thought the first time was correct, and they're quite intransigent about it, which is frustrating. Because
there's layers to this, isn't there? I was just about to say, like, you could have said that Rooney at times was a little bit disrespected because of the way that he changed his game to bring others into it, or Didier Drogba was sometimes a little bit overblown because there were various seasons where 3 or 4 seasons where he posted under 10 league goals, but people, like you've said, won't remember that. They'll remember him scoring the Champions League final goal. They'll remember that like 30 goal season.
Well, and And if somebody as well, it gets more complicated still than that, because then someone like Patrick Bamford, I really like Patrick Bamford and he's having an incredible season, but also Leeds are pretty porous at the back. And obviously they kind of like sell out the defence to try and create huge chances in attack. Well, maybe if they had a slightly better striker, or a striker who could, beat a man or something a bit more, maybe they wouldn't have to overcommit quite so much to create those chances. We don't really know. Like, there are so many things that go into whether a striker is performing or not, whether they're underperforming or not, that it's really, really hard to work out how team effects intersect with a player's actual ability. So, I don't know, like, I just think like it's good to be relatively agnostic about these things and not really judge somebody except when you see somebody, who's scored who's taking one shot a game and they've scored like 10 goals. Like, then I think, all right, let's pump the brakes a bit.
Yeah, I think that sometimes people are like really want us to be a bit more decisive on players, or a bit more like sensationalist when they're experiencing like a high or a low. But I think that is just generally a good approach, and one that we adopt maybe to our own downfall sometimes, views wise, because we're not screaming down a lens at this player's and so on and so forth. But like I suppose one big player we could potentially like finish up on is Edinson Hazard. Like, he's obviously been labelled as one of the worst Galacticos ever. I mean, currently he is taking that crown, but
yeah, he is.
But
by
I suppose
distance.
He's at an interesting crossroads where it's like, do you believe that he can get better, and should Real Madrid persevere with him, or should they look to offload him as soon as possible?
I mean,
my God, he's 30 now as well, isn't he? He's 30.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where does he go?
We said
Who
this.
takes him? Who takes him, man? Who takes him now?
We said this. Like, he had to hit the ground running. There was no margin for error in order for that to be a sound investment. If they do get that extra 50 million, he becomes the second most expensive transfer of all time.
Well, they're not going to get the second 50 million.
I don't know. They won the league in his first season. That might have been one of the stipulations. I don't know how individual they are.
I think one of them was. I'm pretty sure one of them was winning the Ballon d'Or as well, though. And there's absolutely sod all chance that he's winning the Ballon d'Or from this position. And I saw reports this week linking him with sort of a sensational move back to Chelsea, and I just thought to myself, absolutely no way. Like, Granascaya has had a worldie, and she knows it. I can't believe the drop-off here. Obviously, the injuries have been not career-ending, but massively career-altering. Like, I think the Belgian team doctor gave an interview this week, and he was effectively saying like they are catastrophic at this point.
But that's part of aging, though. Like, and this is the thing. I mean, in a way, we look smarter on Hazard than maybe we were, in that we said, look, given his age, this is slightly risky, and everyone was like, no, this is fantastic business. This is like the best signing you could ever make. And it was like, all right, but if he gets injured his first season and they lose that year, suddenly he's 29, 30, and you've kind of wasted one of the best seasons you'd expect to get from him. And in the end, he's been absolutely god-awful since he arrived there. Like, genuinely dreadful, top to bottom.
Yeah, it's like 3 goals in 18
Yeah,
months, isn't it? But even when he's played, like, his key passes, his shots, like, they don't look anything like, what he was putting up in his final season.
But he didn't even have to be that bad to make our point. Our point was just like, this is a short-term deal, and if he doesn't perform in the short term, then they're not coming out ahead. It's kind of a little bit like the Thomas Partey conversation, where there are lots of fans who are like, he's been fantastic. Like, anyone who was against this transfer is an idiot. And it's like, well, no, because the people who were against this transfer, mostly, some people didn't like him as a player. But a lot of the people who were against the transfer were kind of saying, well, no, the issue is that the first 2 years he might be good, and then he might be bad the last 2 years because of his age. Well, we won't know if that's the case until we get to the last 2 years of his contract. And actually, he's already missed basically the first half of his first season. So, I mean, all these things kind of get factored in, don't they? And you have to work out whether something was worthwhile. And as a general rule, buying a 28, 29-year-old winger who gets fouled constantly and has been fouled constantly for half a decade is perhaps not the wisest move. And it's worked out incredibly badly for them, and it's kind of funny.
He was actually the most foul player of the decade. Mental, yeah. And it's miraculous that he hasn't had like a consistent run of injuries until now. And like you said, there wouldn't have necessarily been career ending had he been 26, 27. And what puzzles me most about that deal was that, they could have got him on a pre-contract 6 months down the line. Surely that should have given them a stronger negotiating position than stumping up 100 mil. Like, they the bed because they were of those consecutive third place finishes, right? And Valencia, they were closer to Valencia than Barcelona. They felt like they needed a Galactico. I get that, but in the end, all they needed to do to win that 1920 title was shore up the defense a little bit. It's mad. So I don't think he's. I mean, to bring it back to this question, like, he's not being disrespected, but Real Madrid paying that money in the first instance has not like given him much room to be human in, has it?
Yeah, totally agree. Right, should we move on to some quick fire questions then?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, all right, let's do some. Brave Huss 24 says, which Premier League side will go further in the Champions League, Pat?
Right, who's in it? Is everyone in it?
In the Champions League,
Liverpool.
Chelsea won their group, definitely. Man City went through.
Chelsea have Atletico.
I don't. And Liverpool got
City have
RB
got Gladbach.
Leipzig. I mean,
City have got Gladbach.
City, because City are probably the best team in Europe right now. They're better than all the Spanish teams. They're better than Bayern. They're better than all the Italian teams. Don't know about PSG, but you never know about PSG. I mean,
Barca and Real aren't even the best Spanish teams now. It's mad.
Yeah, I mean, like there aren't that many great teams this season, whereas City are great, right?
Yeah, I think the only team that sort of could stop City is like a stumbling block like Atletico, who I think I would put Atletico Madrid right up there as one of the favourites for this year's Champions League as well. But I agree, Man City, I think, are favourites to go the furthest. I think the fact that Leipzig's game, in fact, I'm not sure how many of the games are going to be played on neutral venues, but I think that suits Leipzig a little bit more as well. Although have they still got one leg at Anfield? My research has been really poor here. I'm not sure. Really poor, but yeah, I'll stick with Man City.
Yeah, I think they might be going to Hungary, but don't know.
Yeah, right. That was a very, very poor answer. I'm not going to lie, from all three of us. We definitely should have done some more research there. Right, let's move on to another one. This one from Josh Wintery. Should Luke Shaw start for England at the Euros, Chris?
Oh, surely you've got the strongest opinion on this.
I'm trying to think of the other left back. So who are the other left back options?
Ben Chilwell.
Ben Chilwell.
People are talking about James Justin as well now.
James Justin. Shaw's having the best season of any of them. I don't think he'll start just because I think Southgate's going to go with what he knows, and that's Ben Chilwell. And I think that'll be the case for quite a few positions. Like I don't see Foden, etc., starting for England at the Euros. I think he'll be an impact sub. I think Shaw to go to the Euros is a good bet, but to start, I still think he'll stick with Ben Chilwell. What do you think?
I would, I don't think if he carries on like this, if Marcos Alonso keeps taking preference over Chilwell for the remainder of the season, then Luke Shaw should fully expect to be ahead of him.
I think he's created the most chances of any defender in the league after maybe João Cancelo.
He's taking corners and free kicks and stuff as well, right? So maybe that's a little bit misleading. But I think Chilwell probably does that for Chelsea a lot of the time as well. At least from one side, right? Mate, yeah, ultimately, not that bothered. But I'm pro Shaw, let's do it.
Pat?
Oh, I don't care about England. Matt Target for England.
Target for England. It's not the worst shout, He is having a very good season, and Villa are absolutely flying, so I'm sure he's probably in consideration. Let's do this one then from Hamish, MCFC. Have any Premier League players pulled away as favourites for the PFA Player of the Year so far? Pat, let's come to you.
Yeah, I mean there are a few who are clear candidates. I mean, Kane's goal and assist numbers have been absolutely ludicrous, and Kane, because he's English, he's one of those guys who can actually, where they'll overlook the fact that his team is dog shit, in order to recognise him. Whereas I think Mo Salah, for instance, like Mo Salah's been incredible, but I don't think they'll look past the fact that Liverpool have had a disappointing season and give it to Mo Salah. Do
you want me to tell you the top five with the bookies? I've got it loaded up.
It's going to be Kane, Grealish.
Go on. Grealish is fifth, yeah.
Grealish is fifth? I think that completely. Yeah. I think they're completely misunderstanding the way voting goes for this. I reckon Grealish will be like top two.
All right, so the top five, I'll read them to you in order now. Favourite is Bruno Fernandes.
Oh, fair enough.
Harry Kane is second. That's a good shout there. Ilkay Gundogan is third. Ruben Dias, fourth. Kevin De Bruyne, fifth.
Nah, come on.
which I think is an interesting one. Grealish 6th, Salah 7th, Son 8th, Foden 9, and Vardy 10.
Bloody hell.
I automatically just go to pick a forward, right? Because I know that Van Dijk won it as well, but like it normally goes to a forward, doesn't it?
I think Bruno's going to win.
I think they're all.
I think Bruno's going to win.
They're all pretty warranted.
I just think Bruno's got kind of like he's got a bit of a wave of kind of momentum behind him. He seems to win every win every Premier League Player of the Month at the moment. I think he's won something like 4 in 5 or 3 in 4 or something ridiculous like that. And all of his goals being worldies kind of helps as well. Like it's either a penalty or a worldie.
Which to what Pat said, in that like your team is that reliant on Bruno that he gets extra credit for it.
Because I think he's got 22 goal involvements in 22 games. I think there's that sort of landslide of momentum behind Bruno at the moment, unless he completely drops off, which is perfectly feasible. But at the moment, I'm struggling to look past him, just because I've got a feeling Tottenham could slip and slide, and if Harry picks up another injury or something, then it's really going to dent him.
I'm not sure. I think it depends how dominant Manchester City continue to be, because if they run away with the Premier League, if they go deep in the Champions League, if they win the Carabao Cup, I think it will be inevitable. It's going to be one of those guys, and I'd like to think it could be someone like Gundogan. I mean, there is precedent with Luka Modric winning the Ballon d'Or, isn't there? But yeah, I can imagine it being a City boy.
I think Ruben
Diaz is a bit.
I think he'll win the Young Player of the Year. I think he'll win the Young Player of the Year.
Does he still qualify?
He still qualifies. Still qualifies for the Young Player of the Year, even though he'll be 24 at the time of the awards ceremony. He would still qualify. So I think
that needs readdressing, doesn't it? Stupid.
I don't think a City player
should be under 21s.
I don't think a City player's got a shot at Player of the Year unless it's De Bruyne, unless De Bruyne or Sterling goes on an unreal scoring run, just before the award, because they just never go for guys like Gundogan, and I don't think they'll go for Ruben Diaz either. It just doesn't seem to me like something they do. There's not one guy running that attack in the absence of De Bruyne.
Yeah, and no, I'd agree, and like I said before, I'm inclined to instinctively go for an attacker, but I think the other big teams are so inconsistent at the moment that. But by the end of the season, we might just, City might be the only dominant team, and then it might, put them in a favourable position. But yeah, not bothered.
All right, let's finish on a personal question then. This one from Brave Huss. I think we've already done one question from him, but he's got a double whammy in there. Name your all-time favourite sports person, Pat.
Oh my God. Oh, can someone else go first? I need a moment.
God, this is a toughie, isn't it? I need a moment to think about this as well.
Jesus.
I mean,
let's exclude
footballers. Let's exclude footballers. So you can't pick a footballer, because we'll all say a footballer otherwise. That's probably fair. So outside of the world of football, who's your all-time favourite sports person? Chris, you got anybody you come to think of straight away?
We've discussed this before. I need to get more into other sports. I used to, Ronnie O'Sullivan springs to mind just because he's entertaining. But favourite sportsman. Oh my God!
I mean, none of us are really into our basketball.
You've probably got more of an interest in other sports than I do, like rugby and more rugby. So, is there anyone from the world of rugby?
I mean, probably up there, the likes of Johnny Wilkinson, even though he is a bit of a boring, kind of a weird bloke, just because he was so exceptional at what he did. Obviously, stands him in great stead. He's just really sort of technical.
Vanilla.
So when in the day when he was playing and stuff, he would go to the nth degree, do eye training and stuff like that, to work on the power of his eyes and things. So yeah, he's a bit of an oddball, but
intense.
Obviously one of the best ever. Very, very intense bloke. Yeah, I think maybe Tiger Woods is up there for me.
Enjoyed the comeback.
His comeback, but also just his brilliance pre-comeback, certainly up there in and around. Roger Federer, I think, even though I'm not the biggest tennis fan, it's something about his aura I really, really like.
I watched the Andy Murray documentary recently on Amazon. Is it Resurfacing?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
I think Andy Murray, probably deserves, a bit like Lewis Hamilton, right? More credit, more adulation than they get from the British public. Just because they don't, again... Maybe tying back with the first question, they don't have a certain personality type.
Yeah, maybe Freddie Flintoff in the cricket, just because he's a little bit of an outside, like, not a classic straight down the line sportsman, you know, like drinking and partying, and he's a bit more of a maverick. But then equally, like, Jimmy Anderson's probably the greatest bowler that's ever lived, or at least up there in terms of Test cricket. So, yeah, I would say those sort of names. Pat, have you had time to think now? I've rambled on for the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because the favourite, like, it's almost like you want it to be somebody that you kind of slightly care about as a person beyond just wanting to watch them as a sportsman. Because I was trying to think of people who, like, meant something to me when I was a kid. And so I really loved, like, Leighton Hewitt because I was into tennis. The sports I was into growing up were like tennis and rugby. So Jonah Lomu, I'd say probably. Jonah Lomu. Yeah, I also loved Yanni De Beer, who was a fly half for South Africa. But yeah, I think probably Jonah Lomu was one of the few people who, like, actually meant a lot to me, and I loved watching him play. Whereas, like, Federer, I love watching him play. I don't really care about the guy. Like, I mean, Serena, but I kind of, when I really loved Serena was when she was like young and coming up, and then after a while she was just so dominant that you were just hoping someone would come along good enough to challenge her. But yeah. Serena's got to be in the conversation too.
Fair. Chris, have you got an answer now, or?
No, now I've moved on in my head to sort of like fictional sporting people, like the Mighty Ducks.
Ridiculous. Right, okay. Pat, what was the podcast on this week?
The podcast this week was How to Fix Barcelona. Was it How to Fix Barcelona? No, it wasn't. That was the week before. It was a roundup. We had Michael McCubbin and Sam Abasaki back on the podcast for the first time in a while. And we talked about Man City's demolition of Liverpool, what's going wrong with Liverpool at the moment. We also chatted over the Italian title race because Zlatan Ibrahimovic scored his 500th career goal at the age of, 45 or whatever. So that was a pretty good time. And I think next week we're going to do something on maybe how Mourinho can save his job if such a thing is possible.
Oof. Chris, anything you want to plug?
No, I just want to say that we probably shouldn't shoot this at 4 p.m. ever again. Severe lack of freshness. But apart from that, go over to EFD, check out the Explained actually on Bayer Leverkusen's Talent Factory. Really informative video. It's not got enough love yet, so go and pay it its dues.
Yeah, thanks very much for watching, everybody. See you later. Bye.